Hi, remote art students. It's time for another week of art. Today we're going to continue our ink shoe drawing and let's get on with it. Okay, so first let's talk about pens. You have to find a pen at your house. Um, Here are the different kinds of pens you can use. If you have this is an ultra fine point Sharpie. Maybe you have this laying around at your house. Um, Maybe you have this left over from a previous project. Uh, Great, you can use this. This is a thin Sharpie. This will work great. So if you have this around the house, great. Or you can pick one up, I guess. Um, what else works really well, which is kind of fancy, are these Micron pens. Now, these Micron pens, these are like art drawing pens, and you can get them at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or any kind of actual art store. And maybe Target. I doubt it. I doubt it at Target. But these are really good. I use these for my real ink drawings, right? And I recommend number 3 and maybe number 5. But they usually sell these in packs. Like maybe you'll get a 1, 3, and a 5. Um, that's great. Maybe if you get like a 2 and a 3, you could use a 2 or any of these pens are good, but like a one is pretty thin. You could use a one, but I don't recommend it. I recommend a one for some details, but for the overall drawing, a 3 or a 5 is pretty good for this. So, and if you get an 8, I don't know. Anyways, 3 and 5 is the best numbers, but you could probably use any numbers of these. And then this is a pen. Let me show you what this looks like. So this is an ink, a pilot pen, and it's kind of like a roller ball and has ink inside. This works pretty good. This works really good. It's really smooth and it has a nice black line. So that's pretty good. And this is the lowest. If you can't find any of these nicer pens, I recommend use the nicest pen you can find. One that has smooth black ink. Excuse me. So use a nice smooth black ink. Microns are the best. Sharpie's like second best. The ultra fine point Sharpie, not a regular Sharpie, and a regular Sharpie's too thick. A rollerball thin pilot, with ink is great. And then this is just a Bic, like I don't know what you call these things. They're terrible. Well, they're not terrible. They're like for signing checks. This one feels pretty smooth. So that's black. So I'm going to use this one. This is just a regular black pen. If you have blue, try to find a black one. If all you have is blue, I guess that's like the last thing you're going to use. It's a blue Bic pen, right? Try to find a black one. Try to find any kind of these other ones I showed you. If you don't have anything, you could use blue, I guess. Just use what you have. This is probably the worst pen, but I can still get a good result with it. So if you can't find any of those other pens around the house, you can ask a parent to help you. Find a good drawing black pen. But if you can't find anything, you can use this. This is just a Bic. Yours might even look different. This looks a little fancier than a typical Bic pen. So I'm going to use this to represent, like you can't find any of the real good pens. So those other pens are going to look really good. Okay, so here's my drawing. I have my shoe, my actual shoe draw. My shoe is like off camera here, so I can look at it and I can look at the quality of the line. But the first thing we're going to do is, I'm going to get rid of this cap. First thing we're going to do is simply, you're going to very carefully trace your basic shapes and lines, right? And so you're going to just trace around and you want to get, right on that line and you want to follow it. Now, when you trace with your black pen, you want to really capture the feel of those lines, right? So if there's a bump, you're going to follow that bump. If it kind of goes in a little bit right there, you're going to kind of go in a little bit, and then you're going to kind of follow around. If it's a soft leather, you're going to kind of follow around it. If it's a little bumpy, if it has a little bump, like here there's kind of a bump from the leather, you're going to follow that bump. you want to kind of capture the quality of that line. And I talked about this in one of my classes, line quality, right? So line quality is variation or different kinds of lines. And you're like, well, all the lines are the same. Kind of, but some of the lines are thicker, some of the lines are thinner, some of the lines are bumpier, rounder, right? Like right here, I've got some soft, I don't know what it is. It's like wool. Can I show you? It's like wool. It's like kind of this bumpy wool. So I'm definitely gonna, when I get to tracing this part, I'm gonna like kind of make those lines kind of softer and bumpier, right? Let's see, this kind of goes in here. It kind of actually goes into here and it stops. And then this is kind of the, so it's very thin, kind of bumpy line. Then let's see. Now what I'm doing first is I'm going to trace around the whole shoe. And so you can do that too. You can trace around your whole shoe and you'll notice that you don't get every, like I'm only tracing part of the shoelace, right? It's because it's the outside of that shape, right? Like, so it's going to be some shoelace, like this is going to have a bump here. And then this is part of the leather, and then here's another shoelace part. What this does is, this is kind of like a weird drawing convention where it separates our shoe shape from the background, right? And it's not necessarily realistic, but what it does is it makes a pleasing artistic result because it separates our subject matter from the background. And that's kind of what we're doing. And then we will come back and maybe make some parts of this line thicker, right? Now remember, you want to kind of look at your shoe. You can turn your page if you have to too. Let's see. Sometimes you have to do that. It's easier. You can look at your shoe while you're drawing these ink outlines. To help you get that line just right. All right. So I kind of traced around it. Already it's looking interesting, right? Um, the black line really does separate it from the white of the paper. And that's really nice. Again, this is an art form, right? And our shoe, you know, we want it to look as realistic as possible. It may not look quote unquote super realistic, but the more we're careful with our lines and our line quality, and the more we have this black line versus the white background, it's really going to separate. It's going to become a real interesting object to look at, right? And that's kind of what we're going for here. Now, what we want to do when we're tracing this is, now I'm not making any of my lines thicker yet. Right now, they're all kind of the same size. And that's okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to make some of these, the more thicker lines thicker later, but not right now. Currently, I'm just tracing all the basic lines, right? So let's see, I've got this line here. And I'm not going to do my stitching yet. I'll do the stitching very soon. Okay, let's see. Okay, so you're going to trace your basic shapes too. Your basic shapes are going to look different than mine because, let me see if I can move this. I don't have a lot of space. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm looking at my shoe. I'm drawing this. There's like an interesting design in this zipper pull. Okay. And then there's like, this is the zipper. Let's see here. It goes down all the way down to here. So I'm tracing the basic shapes, and that's what you're going to do. So if you want, you can pause the video and just trace all your basic shapes, kind of like what I'm doing, and then fast forward to the part where I do stitching. Let's see here. Or you can just watch the whole video. You can kind of get an idea. But I'm not doing any of the stitching yet. I'm just working on this part. Okay. Oh. Okay. I'm looking at my drawing. Okay, those are stitching. Okay, so let's see here. I've got this is the leather. The leather is, on my particular shoe, is surrounded by stitching, so I got to get it just right. Some of these lines are a little wavy because they're leather, right? Gosh, let me look at my shoe. Oh yeah. Okay, so here it is. Okay, and then there's like a leather piece here. Okay, that's like a wrinkle. It looks like my sole is kind of, for my shoe, it's kind of separating. It's kind of weak. So there's like this gap in the middle. Kind of stinks. I got to glue it. Okay, so that's what that is. And then there's some lines. There's some lines over here. It appears that for the heel, they stack these kind of rows. Can you even see this? Barely. These rows of leather. Okay. Okay, so then finally, let's see. I'm going to draw this part. So let's see. We've got my shoelace here. Okay. There's like a knot here. Okay, and then I've got these, I think these are called grommets. These are like metal circles where the shoelaces go into. It's a shoelace. This is part of the, okay. You want to be kind of careful when you trace these. You're trying to get the lines just right, but you're also looking at your original shoe. If you did your original drawing slightly off, you can just make it more accurate. Like here, can you even see it? I didn't like perfectly follow that line because it's more rounder and more accurate when I inked it. So that's okay. I mean, you can kind of correct some of your failed, like if you messed up a little in your original drawing, when you ink it, you kind of have like a second chance to do it more accurate. Or if it doesn't, you want to follow those lines carefully, but if you don't follow them carefully, it's okay because you can erase those other lines later, the pencil lines, and then no one's going to know. It'll look fine. It's hard to, sometimes it's hard to perfectly trace them. I mean, if you go slow, you can, but okay. And then finally, oh, I got this thing here. And that's it. Okay. Okay, good. So I got all the basic lines traced. I haven't done any of the stitching yet. Oh, and I haven't done any of the zipper stuff yet. So we'll talk. This is what you want to do. Now we have basic outlines, which are good, and now it's time for the stitching. Now originally we just did a very faint line for a stitch line, but now what I'm going to do is I didn't want to draw every little stitch line because when I ink it, I'm going to actually draw all those lines. And so so now we can draw our stitch lines. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to start right here at the heel. So here's the leather part. That's the thick line, but there's like three. Okay, here we go. Stitches. So here's my first stitch line, and I'm just going to draw those very thin stitches. Now, if you actually have micron pens, if you suckered your parents into letting you get micron pens, which are really nice, I mean, they're good to have. You could probably use a 1. Like if you're using a 3, if you're using a 3 to like do the basic outline of your shoe, like that's what I would do. I'd probably use a 3. Then I would use a 1 if you have a 1. Don't buy extras or anything. Like, but I'm just saying if you bought like a 3 pack, you know, and you have like a 1, 3, and a 5 or something like that, then a 1 would be your stitch, 3 would be your basic outline, and then a 5 would be for your thicker lines. But here you can see, now some of these stitches are bigger, like this stitch right here on top of the leather is a little longer. So I'm going to make those longer than the other stitches actually, which is kind of interesting. And so this will take a long time. Let's see here. So there you can see different kinds of stitches. And originally I just drew the line, right, where that stitch was going to go. But I didn't draw all those dashed lines when I was using my pencil. When I'm using my ink, though, now's the time to really go in there and draw those. Okay, so what else do I got stitching? I got lots of stitching, so let's do it here. I got one here. Let's see. This is a little like that. There's a stitch on top. Okay. Now the zipper, there's 2 lines of stitch on the zipper. So here we go. Here's this one. Now, if they're not all perfectly the same stitch distance, that's okay. And it'll make it look a little more natural because they're not going to be. So this is just a ballpoint pen, black, and it's working pretty good. So the other pens will look even better. So don't worry if you don't have the best pen at home. Try to find the best pen, right? Don't just be satisfied with just, look a little harder, right? Like don't be lazy. Try to find a good black pen. I'm sure you got drawers of pens at home. But like I said, Micron's the best. This pen is really good. This one would have been good. I would have used that one. But like I said, I'm using the lowest common denominator, meaning the pen that looks the least best to represent if you can't find any really good stuff. And I want to show you that you can still have a good result. It's the quality of line that you're creating, the carefulness of your lines that make this look good. Okay. So that looks good. Let me see. I'm gonna hurry up and finish all my stitching here. Let's see. I got 2 stitches here. Okay. Then I don't want to do stitching next week. Next week we'll do some final. What we'll do next week is we'll make some lines thicker, and we'll do. I got a line that goes here. So these are all my stitch lines. Next week we'll do. We'll make some lines thicker and. We'll do some wrinkles today. Let's see. I want to do some of that. But what's going to happen is you're going to get all happy with your lines, and you're not going to want to make lines thicker. And I'm going to force you to, because if you have thicker lines, it will make your drawing look more dynamic, and the quality of lines will look more dynamic. Okay, so these are all my stitch lines. I didn't go in and do this zipper yet. There's all kinds of detail in that zipper. Okay, let's see. I got stitch here. You might have more stitching than me. That's fine. Go ahead and do all your stitching. There's like a big stitch here. Is that it? Did I get them all? There's like this little, one of the stitch is like loose, so there's like a little hair kind of sticking out. Here too, it's kind of like, you can draw that stuff. Okay, am I done with the stitching? Oh, I got a little stitching here. You can't really see it. Oh, no, it goes up here a little. And I got a little here. Okay. Okay, so already this is looking pretty good. It's like, wow, it's pretty good. I hope you like your result. Even if your shoe isn't like ultra realistic, if you're careful and drawing all your lines and you're inking them, it's gonna look good. I've had a lot of experience, so maybe I'm making this look easy. But don't let that discourage you. You're just gonna work as hard as you can, and your shoe's gonna be awesome. Okay. Now we talked about quality of line. So some lines, we're gonna do the thicker lines next week. But I got some wrinkles in my shoe. So, and they're going to be kind of thin and kind of wavy, like not wavy, but they're going to be kind of sketchy. That's the best word, sketchy. So I've got kind of like a wrinkle here, and I'm just going to kind of faintly, I'm just going to kind of draw some like, boy, you can kind of see it. It's not very, and then it's kind of like, it's make kind of like a dashed line, but it's kind of like a sketchy line. And I'm not pressing down as hard. It's not a mechanical stitch, but it is kind of like a, let's see if I can draw this. They're just kind of thin, they're kind of sketchy, like you can have some extra lines in there, you kind of sketch it in. And that will kind of help it feel like a wrinkle. So here, let me kind of put that closer so you can see it. So that's kind of like my, that's a little out of focus. That's like my wrinkle. Let's see, I got a wrinkle over here. And then let's see. Now there's all kinds of scuff marks on my shoe. Scuff mark is where like, um, boy, we're gonna do those next week. Scuff marks are like, can I show you? Like, look at all these marks. You're like, can I draw those lines? I want to. Yeah, go for it. You can do that. Here you can see, look at this. This is sad. See how the bottom of my shoe, I gotta glue it. I really like this shoe though, so I gotta fix it. It's kind of cheap. It's cheap that my shoe did that. There's like a couple main, there's some, I'm gonna draw some of these main scuff marks. They're thin though. They're kind of like, you may not have that if you have a tennis shoe, but you can definitely draw these lines. And I'm just drawing these kind of wavy wrinkles. Let's see, what else do I got? So there's like a little bit of a wavy wrinkle here. And then maybe a little here. They're kind of like, yeah, it kind of makes it look like an old, now these are, I'm trying to make these light, right? And then let's see, because they're thin, they're like, I don't know, they're like, I got some scuff marks. I'm gonna draw, oh, and then I got some, here there's some. This is like, so you can kind of see that they're very thin. Let me draw a little here. Yeah. So it kind of makes it look old. They're like very thin lines. So that's what I mean by quality of line. Like this edge of the leather is kind of like a solid line. These wrinkles are kind of like very soft, kind of sketchy lines. Like they're not perfect lines, right? And so they kind of make it look worn and old, and that looks kind of nice. You probably don't want to do too many of these unless you have a really, really, really old shoe. But like I said, if you're doing this carefully and there's a lot of wrinkle lines, that's fine. It'll look good. In fact, the more concentrated detail we have in this shoe, the more it'll separate from the white background. Okay, well, we didn't do everything today. I still have to do this zipper detail. I want to make some lines thicker. There's even some dark areas in like kind of this rubber sole and in my shoelace, and so I'll kind of show you how we can make things darker, kind of like a blended, um, like we can add some values, like some darker values, right, to our shoe. But that's enough for today. So we still have one more week of this. So what kind of progress do I want you to make on your shoe? Well, I want you to trace around all the basic shapes of your shoe. I want you to do the stitching, if they're stitching, and then I want you to do some wrinkles. And then next week we're gonna go in and we're gonna add some darker, like so if like your shoelace is kind of like a dark brown or a dark gray, I'll show you how to make it darker. This is definitely like a dark gray or a black, so I'm gonna add that. And then we're gonna make some of our lines thicker. So like underneath this leather part, it's a little darker, almost like a shadow. So we'll make those lines thicker, right? Like right here. Like already this looks nice that this line is thick as opposed to these thinner wrinkle lines, but we're going to make this a teeny bit thicker in certain areas, and like this line will be a little thicker so it stands out more and it'll look good. But that's it for today, so I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you next time for our third installment of our ink shoe drawing. I'll talk to you later. Bye.